Towards the tail end of the journey, an image gets burned into the memory. In my opinion, it is one of the most visually poetic scenes that this medium has to offer. The food is already on the table, right in front of the guests, yet they are struggling, aching, wishing to acquire something that remains just out of reach. This is what a life without introspection looks like. To have enough already, but none of it either enriches or satisfies. A pathetic, empty existence built on endless greed and gluttony. It is a metaphor, a cautionary tale for those who wish to understand, and a nightmare for those who refuse to. Forgive me, for I was getting ahead of myself. Let's start from the beginning. Our protagonist sees a masked lady in a dream, before waking up inside a tiny suitcase. Water leaks from a pipe beside her. It is the only sound the room makes, for now. The camera sways, never staying in one singular position. It is as if it was floating on a water surface. That gives us a little clue about where we might be located, but we will only be able to say for sure later. The girl is wearing a bright yellow raincoat. She goes by many names. The official website calls her 6. I call her what she looks like, a child. And this isn't a place suitable for one. Soon after, I am greeted with a long staircase. I understand our goal is to ascend, possibly to escape. Whatever superficial playfulness or innocence that might have remained soon disappears as I see the lifeless body of a man hanging from the ceiling. Right underneath him, a letter left behind for whom I don't know. We never get to read it, but in retrospect, perhaps I understand the depths of despair that forced him to take his own life. Actually, I'm wrong. A certain sense of innocence does remain alive due to encounters with the gnomes. They don't talk, but then again, neither do we. But you don't need body language experts to tell that we find comfort in each other's presence. As if the current overall atmosphere wasn't ominous enough, I see in the distance a certain monstrosity dragging a cage overlooked by a glowing, radiating eye. Doesn't take too long for me to figure out that we are in a prison, and the prisoners are children, and that the eye turns escaping children into stone. And whoever's in charge of this operation has appointed a blind man with long arms called the Janitor to take care of the children. For what purpose, I dreaded to know. Around this time, the first attack of hunger approaches our protagonist. The stomach roars and growls. Another prisoner sitting in the prison's mess hall kindly passes us a loaf of bread. The feeling passes, but it might just return stronger the next time, and it might put us in trouble. After a quick detour where I stumbled upon a surveillance room, which frankly made little sense considering the janitor is blind, and after making my way through his room, another attack of hunger engulfs the child. She moves in pain towards a piece of raw meat, suspiciously placed inside a cage. The meat is consumed, but it was perhaps too expensive. As the janitor's long arm closes the door shut, we are trapped. But it's not for too long. We quickly make an escape, finding ourselves in a room full of shoes, a lot of them, and none that would fit a child, so where did they come from? Does this structure contain these many adults, and if their footwear is here, what was their own fate? We moved through some rooms, evading the janitor. One room was filled with ample of toys, another filled with grandfather clocks, and then there was a library. Questions after questions. Was the janitor always blind? Because if so, why all these books? Unless they are all written in Braille, which in that case I retract my question and apologize. He chases me one final time, stretching his arms in the narrowest of spaces. The child protects herself, and in her quest for survival, she manages to close a door down the janitor's hands. He naturally screams in pain. Now he will never be able to reach for a child. His predatory ways have likely come to an end. Back when I was trying to slip past the janitor unnoticed, I got to see him working. It made my skin crawl. It made me angrier knowing that he couldn't even see what he was doing. Even though I'm pretty sure he was well aware, but perhaps seeing it through his own eyes rather than perceiving it through his senses might have led to a change of heart. I saw it's hard to describe. I saw him grabbing a deceased body of a child, wrapping them up, then latching them onto a meat hook conveyor belt. Well, we had a chance to catch a ride on the same. I was curious to see what it was all leading towards and to figure out what I could do to stop all this madness. In the distance, I saw another creature before dropping into a heap of wrapped body bags. Hunger struck again, more intense than ever before, and the only thing that could satisfy it was a trapped rat. I didn't feel comfortable with all this. Something was at play here, but it was too dangerous to stop for reflection. I enter a kitchen, fruits, vegetables, meat, a lot of meat, and in the next room I would find the butcher, a grotesque creature cutting and cooking. I saw it up close, seasoning and then molesting dead fishes. Whatever, while searching for a way out, I needed to find a key, and it led me into a bedroom. Suddenly, the lights were turned on, and I was left in shock at the reveal. Wait, what do you mean there's another? Twin chefs? Great. Their kitchen was a mess, but thanks to that I could climb up a stack of plates, which eventually led to a chase. I ultimately narrowly escaped using the same vehicle I came in. They threw bottles at me on my way out though. I slipped through a crack, and I found myself walking on a large metal pipe. Just above me, a light was piercing through. Was the outside world close by? Not really. What I saw outside wasn't a chance of escape, it was pure despair. I saw the structure I was in. The camera zoomed out to show me the entrance or the mouth of this ship or this submarine. It was open, wide open, and through another ship, an endless line of silhouettes entered the vessel that was holding me captive. Then I saw this line up close. They were bloated, men and women, some wearing a mask, some wearing a hat. Theoretically, they were the most human element I had seen so far, but there was something wrong with them. They had something I had been dealing with during this entire journey. Hunger. Hypnotic hunger, only stronger, the kind of hunger that could never be satisfied. They continued to hog on their food like animals. They weren't eating. You couldn't describe this as eating. It was as if they were dumping it into their stomach without taste or enjoyment. And every time I came into their vision, their focus would change. They craved to devour me. But unlike me, they were unfit, lazy, couldn't even use their legs. I gave them the run around. What I didn't realize was, witnessing all the horror throughout this journey, it was changing me. Now hunger struck me again, and in a room, a gnome was handing out to me a sausage. But screw that small piece of meat, I went for the bigger one. Yeah, I ate the only source of comfort, the only source of innocence that was left in this forsaken, soulless, and rotten place. While I was making sense of what had just transpired, I realized that I had seen her. You know, the lady from the dream before all of this started. I saw her, observing the guests from a high place, distant and obscuring. Now I had invaded her living quarters, which seemingly had a lot of broken mirrors. I observed her from a distance as she hummed a tune and endlessly played with her hair. And then I found an unbroken mirror. Color me surprised, the lady can't stand her own reflection. Figures. I had her weakened, left her gasping for air. Then I noticed her mask had fallen off, when suddenly the hunger returned. From a loaf of bread to raw meat, to a trapped living rat, to a gnome, and now finally an adult human. Is my hunger indistinguishable from those exhibited by the guests? The lady clearly had certain magical powers, and by eating her, those powers had transferred to our tiny protagonist. As she made her way out, she consumed the soul of every guest she encountered before climbing the stairs and escaping the nightmare, becoming one in the process. Every gnome she had embraced came to say their final goodbyes. This concludes our story. So now let me talk about the metaphors it represents. Before that, I think it's important to clear some concepts. The gnomes are children. They were transformed into gnomes by the lady, as shown through the story of the runaway kid, who becomes the final gnome that Six eats. The runaway kid is a separate side story of another child that occurs parallel to the main one. Oh, and the structure, ship, submarine hybrid we were running around and trying to escape from, it is called the Maw. Metaphor number 1. A life without introspection. Circling back to what I said in the beginning, the characters throughout the journey exhibit zero remorse for what they're doing because they all live an unexamined life. The janitor never stops to think why he takes care of these children, only for them to become food for the guests or converted into gnomes that help in running the maw. The chefs are grotesque, unhygienic, and unbothered. They too are slaves trapped in a cycle, chopping up the meat of guests and deceased children only to serve that food to another lineup of bloated monsters. The guests, they never question whether the food is tasty or whether they had their fill. No, they just keep dumping. At the sight of Six, their craving goes from bad to deranged as they chase her like bloodthirsty savages. They can never be satisfied. I have observed that the happiest people in the world are those that live with a certain type of restraint. Those who give in to each and every one of their inner desires without questioning morality and ethics in their pursuit tend to live hollow, soulless, and miserable lives. Which brings us to the lady. She cannot stand her own reflection, which is the perfect summary of this metaphor. She isn't actually ugly, but in front of a mirror she appears so. Everything about her on a superficial level is so elegant, so carefully curated, yet so fragile. It is the equivalent to someone having a huge ego, outwardly carrying an inflated sense of greatness, yet internally they know who and what they truly are. They cannot confront it, and when they try to do it, they appear ugly and they cannot stand it. The lady knows her empire is built on exploitation of children, guests, and workers. She can carry an aura of dignity all she wants, but the truth is, she is lonely, rotten, and morally ugly, and there is nothing saving her from that reality check. 6 herself also lacks any kind of introspection, but there's a pretty good explanation for that, and I will talk about it a bit later. Metaphor number 2, child labor and exploitation. During the onset of the real-world industrial revolution, the elites used children as young as 4 as a workforce. They worked the same 12-hour shifts as the adults and sometimes even more. This system was a prison in its own right, and the industrialists would often shape a child's personality through years of unfair treatment. Many of them worked in factories and picked up coal, developing occupational diseases. All of that sounds familiar? Well, the gnomes were once children. Their shadows tell the story about their past. The lady converted them to suit her own purpose. Now they are the workers that help keep the maw running. At the first sight of coal, they get to work, becoming robotic for the process. In simple terms, that's exploitation. Children are kidnapped. Most of them get converted into gnomes. Some die and are used as food for the guests. And those that try to escape and are seen by the eye, they get turned into stone. In short, there is no escape. Actually, there is one. The only way to defeat the enemy is to become one. That brings me to metaphor number 3, the loss of innocence. 6 is the only child that actually beat the system. There's a lore-based explanation for that gets explained through the sequel, but keeping it strictly confined within the universe of the first game, there are 2 main reasons. First is her lack of introspection, and then secondly, it is her hunger. Make no mistake, feeling hungry is a natural part of existence, but her hunger got diluted by the things she witnessed on the maw. Children always tend to follow an adult's blueprint. By being exposed to the horrors and the gluttony, she slowly got desensitized to it all. A loaf of bread, a piece of raw meat, a living rat, a gnome, and an adult all existed in the same moral plane for her. For this is a world that had no morality to begin with. We are all born with internal inclinations about right or wrong, but spend too much time in a place where that difference isn't respected and everything spirals into chaos. Children lose their innocence and are forced to grow up in a toxic, hostile, terrible environment. Metaphor number 4, a bleak future. So what do you think happens to the children who survive in a world like this? Do they grow up to be like the guests where the hunger never fades, or do they become a part of the system like the janitor or the chefs? Then again, what kind of future is that? I couldn't help but draw other kinds of metaphors based on consumerism and materialism. How we as a species have become so fixated on the pursuit of temporary, momentary pleasures that we are sacrificing the quality of life for the future generations. My mind also went towards generative AI, how like the lady, many talentless people will use it to compensate for their lack of ambition to learn a proper skill or art form. How they will never be able to confront the reality that their artistic expression isn't their own but one handed to them by a machine. How sad would it be to live in a world where children grow up without innocence, facing monsters and horrors on the daily? A world without empathy. Listen, change is always difficult. The most important human trait I can think of is our ability to care for others, to think about them, to be kind towards others, to comfort those who are in pain, to raise our voices against injustice, to be a light in the darkness. If we can hold on to our ability to care, I believe we hold the power to turn a new leaf. But if we all lose it, then be prepared to sit on a table, chin sagging, belly bloated, out of shape, eating some rotten meat and acting like it provides us with any meaningful form of happiness. With that, I rest my case.